Hi, and welcome to the 63rd TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the inventor of TiddlyWiki, and I'm joined today by a number of guests. May I ask Branimir first, would you like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and say something about your involvement with TiddlyWiki?
Hi, I'm happy to be here again. My name is Branimir and I am from Sofia, Bulgaria. I am strictly a user of TiddlyWiki for 3 years and growing, and I'm building more and more wikis as we as we go with the versions.
Excellent, great to have you here, Branimir. Thank you. Ed,
Sorry, before you introduce Mario, I want to say thank you to Mario because every time after we finish such a hangout, he goes and writes down meeting minutes, so anyone can go and see if they're looking for information. Mario can give more about this.
Indeed, it's a much appreciated service to the community. Thank you, Branimir. Ed, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself, say where you're from, and say something about your involvement with TiddlyWiki?
Yes, sir. My name's Ed Dixon. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico. I've recently rediscovered TiddlyWiki. I think I stumbled into it very back in the very early days and was impressed, but really couldn't use it at that time. I think I found a really good use case for it at this point in regards to educational use. And I'm really excited to be here and to just right now I'm still in the process of soaking it up. Haven't really implemented anything yet. I've just been kind of trying to understand how this thing works. It's amazing. You've done an incredible thing here.
Well, thank you very much, Ed, and it's great to have you here. Perhaps if you're able to, something that's often popular is for visitors to the Hangout to show their own personal uses of TiddlyWiki. It's the kind of thing that is difficult to share by sharing a URL, but sometimes people have been able to share their personal wikis via the screen sharing feature. So I don't know if you might be in a position to do that, Ed, but so it's always a very popular feature when people are able to. Cool. Eric, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself, say where you're from, and say something about your involvement in TiddlyWiki?
Hi there, I'm Eric Schulman. I'm the author of Tiddly Tools, a very popular collection of add-ons and plugins, currently primarily for TiddlyWiki Classic, but also to be redone for TiddlyWiki 5. I'm also the lead developer and maintainer for TiddlyWiki Classic, and I'm located in Silicon Valley.
Great to have you here, Eric. Thanks for joining us. And finally, Mario, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mario Pietsch. I'm from Austria, near Salzburg. Contributed to TiddlyWiki Classic with plugins and themes. Yeah, and the user. And for TiddlyWiki 5, yeah, messing around with it.
Yes, indeed.
Making the language translations into German.
Yes, indeed, and you've been involved, I think, one of the longest of anybody's involvement with TiddlyWiki 5. So today let's kick off first with the questions that are in the Q&A app, and for people who are viewing who aren't in the Hangout, please feel free to add further questions throughout the Hangout, and we'll deal with these ones here first, but we'll return to them as people ask further questions. So first we'll take the question from Ed, and Ed's question was, can I go through the general process of adding a JavaScript framework such as jQuery to TiddlyWiki 5, preferably without using Node if possible? And this is actually something that's come up quite a few times on the group, and frustratingly there's not really an easy answer, as in it requires a fair amount of knowledge of TiddlyWiki to make an assessment of what is involved in adding a particular existing JavaScript library, and in many cases the techniques are quite different. So I'll walk you through some examples to show you. So the TiddlyWiki 5 itself, in the core distribution and with plugins that it uses, actually includes a number of external JavaScript libraries which show some of the techniques involved. So if I whiz through those fairly quickly, then, as we said a bit earlier, I'm still hoping then to return to you and perhaps get you to show us some of the things that you've been doing. So the first library I was going to consider was the crypto library. So the crypto library is very unusual within TiddlyWiki because it's not only used by the core, it's used by the boot kernel. So I'm looking here in a text editor at the TiddlyWiki 5 repo as a local copy on my machine, and you'll see that there's a boot folder and a core folder. The core folder contains the bulk of TiddlyWiki, really, and it's a series of tiddlers, some of which are JavaScript tiddlers, such as this one. But there's also this boot folder that contains the components of TiddlyWiki that boot up just enough of TiddlyWiki to load the plugin that actually contains the core components. And there's two parts. There's a file called boot prefix, which is 100 lines long, and a file called boot.js, which is slightly embarrassingly now nearly 2,000 lines long. I would always point to the fact that a lot of those lines are comments and you know, white space or near white space, but still it's a little bit meatier than I would like. So the encryption library is used when you open an encrypted TiddlyWiki. So let me show you just for reference what that looks like. So when I open an encrypted TiddlyWiki, I get prompted for a password, type the correct password, and then the TiddlyWiki opens as normal. But until I've typed that password, at the point when I'm at the password prompt, none of the tiddlers within TiddlyWiki have been decrypted, and that actually includes the core plugin that contains all of the TiddlyWiki core code. So it's necessary to include the encryption library in quite a crude way. What we do is, here's a copy of the library. It's called the Stanford JavaScript library. And we accompany that JavaScript file with a meta file, which contains the additional fields that TiddlyWiki assigns to the library when it loads it as a tiddler. So the combination of these two files creates a tiddler call with the title library sjcl.js, whose text is set to the content of that file and has the type of application JavaScript, and the library field is set to yes. Now that library field is used in the template that's used to generate TiddlyWiki itself. So if I coming in here, TiddlyWiki5.html.tid is a, you can see mostly an HTML file like this, with occasional transclusions to bring in content. And one of the things, if we search for the word library, you can see here that there's a part that's bringing in all of the system tiddlers of type application JavaScript with the field library set to yes, and it's rendering those within the main HTML file. So if I copy that guy to the clipboard and then look at the source code of TiddlyWiki, there you can see that's the library modules marker that we just looked at in the source, and you can see how there's the div with the ID of library modules, and then there's a script tag containing the SJCS library. So all of that, this packaging of this JavaScript library as a script tag, in fact it's not within the document head, it's at the top of the body. It just happens by virtue of it having the correct type and the correct wherever it is where it says library equals yes, sorry, that library equals yes.
Jeremy, sorry. And above we can see the encrypted stuff, right?
Yes, that's true. We were looking at the encrypted version, and so that is the encrypted content, and quite a lot of it. So, and then in the boot kernel itself, let's just quickly have a look at how it references the crypto library, and you can see it uses the require statement, and that basically the boot kernel itself is it's as if it's executing. Oh no, I do beg your pardon. I'm sorry. There's two choices. In the case of Node.js, we use the require statement to get a reference to the JavaScript library. But in the browser, we just reach for window.sjcl. So we're relying on the fact that this library, one of the things that it does when it's run on the browser, is to create a global variable called sjcl. Okay, so that's the simplest example of an external JavaScript library, which is built into TiddlyWiki itself. Let me now quickly just show you how in the plugins folder, we've got a number of plugins that are basically wrappers around existing plugins. Existing JavaScript libraries. So in the case of KTeX, that's a library that converts latex mathematics formula into HTML, and here there's the file ktex.min.js, and we are using a slightly different technique to reference it. Instead of a meta file, we've got this tiddlywiki.files JSON file that references all of the files that should be included as tiddlers and gives the additional fields for those tiddlers. And you can see here in the case of ktex.min, it's also had to add a prefix and a suffix. So those are two strings that are added to the top and the bottom of the external library as it is baked into a tiddler. And then it's baked into a tiddler with that name. Now, given its function, the KTeX library is used as a widget. So that means that there's, within the same plugin as the library itself, there's a module of type widget. And you can see here that it just requires the KTeX plugin by name. So what we can, this is a very specific technique. Not all external libraries need to be implemented as widgets. But what it shows us is the general structure, which is that we turn the library into a tiddler using the tiddlywiki.files file, how that can make some modifications to the library by adding a prefix and a suffix, and then we can use very ordinary require function to reference the plugin. Sorry, to reference the module, I should say, within the plugin. So that was KTeX. Another example would be the Code Mirror plugin. That again, it manifests itself as a widget. So it manifests itself as an alternative to the normal edit widget. Something like the Markdown library. So this is a library that parses Markdown text and converts it to HTML. And this time we turn it into a parser. We provide a module with the module type parser. And that means that the module slots into TiddlyWiki's existing mechanisms for taking raw text and parsing it in a form that can then be displayed in HTML. So you can see how I'll give you one more example. The Jasmine plugin is a JavaScript library that runs unit tests. And when we wrap that, it's actually wrapped as a startup module, and then it introduces a new module type, which you can see in the plugins edition, which is there we go. Sorry, forgive me. So the additional module type. Forgive me, it's not a module type, it's a tag, in fact. So it references tests that are tagged test spec. So Ed, that was a very quick run through, just showing from a bird's eye view how the problem is that there's little commonality in the way that JavaScript libraries are integrated. Mario, sorry.
Jeremy, I think the question is why would Ed want to include the jQuery library?
Indeed, yes.
What do you want to do?
Specifically, there's a couple of things with CodeMirror. I'm hoping to add more functionality to that to actually get as much of what's in the original CodeMirror, as far as like syntax highlighting, that kind of thing, would be one of the things I'd like to do. More specifically for the educational purpose that I'm wanting to do with the book, there's some code out there for Tin Can API called Tin Can JS, which will allow like learning experiences from a student to be recorded and shared, and documented for school and that type of thing. I'm hoping to add that kind of functionality to some type of a notebook for students.
Which is, just explain to us what Tin Can is.
Yeah.
Tin Can is it's the new version of SCORM, which is some software that's used to track learning experiences through electronic, through computer learning. So this would really add some great functionality to a student notebook. So as they go through and they do tests and things like that, those results are reported to a learning resource store with the school or education system.
Okay, how interesting.
Yeah.
I'm looking around, just trying to find. Here we go.
Do you have a link? Yeah.
Right. So the link is. Oh, switch the thing. This is what I'm looking at, the developer page, and I will just share my screen as I look at it so that people can see the URL there.
Yeah, and there's a Tin Can JS, which I think is also by Rustic. I'm not sure, but that's particular one looks like that would be the easiest one to try to incorporate into TiddlyWiki, but it does require a jQuery. It's built on jQuery, so it's like I'm just kind of pulling resources together right now, and it's like, okay, well, it looks like I'm going to need jQuery in order to be able to use that Tin Can API or Tin Can JS. So that's definitely one on the plate of things I hope to be able to do with this. I may be dreaming, but I can see it happening somehow.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. So this Tin Can API, what I would like to know is whether behind the scenes they've documented an HTTP API, or if they're only publishing these client libraries. What's this? Docs.
I can't see a requirement for jQuery at the moment.
But okay, I mean, it looks like it's okay. Data transfer REST. This is what we want. Excellent. So do people who want to update a piece of status, they authenticate, presumably? Do they need to provide evidence of their assertion that they've done a course or whatever it might be?
I think there's different methods built into the Tin Can API itself for the depending on the resource being used. Like the authentication would probably happen on the end of the student logging in to gain access to whatever it is it's going to report back to the learning resource store, which is the second part of it. There'd be like a separate database that this framework reports to. But I think the authorization is just determined by the fact that they were able to access the resource to begin with.
How interesting. Okay. So, yeah, there isn't really an example of a library exactly like this being used. But what it's doing is very basic HTTP REST transactions. My ambition for TiddlyWiki would be for it to have the native capability to negotiate common REST API idioms. And from what I can see here, this is a lot of composing URLs, with the right path in them, and then making basic HTTP requests. So this looks very amenable to being wrapped in a reasonably general purpose mechanism. And it looks like the entities that we've got, statements, could be modeled as tiddlers with multiple fields. So yeah, it's not it's not a project to be done in an evening, but I think it would be very valuable and interesting as a thing to do.
Cool.
And look forward to helping you.
Yeah, I'm probably going to need quite a bit of it.
Well, I mean, the rule with that stuff is that we always try and help each other in public so that as many people as possible can benefit. And this class of, at the moment, there's support in TiddlyWiki for for saving individual tiddlers to an HTTP API. It's the sync mechanism. And in a way, that's what this is too. It's a storage mechanism, but it's for a special type of entity rather than being used for general tiddlers. So it's not a million miles away from one of the adapter modules, which is these things that plug into the syncer and do synchronization. The difference is that the syncer modules and adapters that we have at the moment, they expect to sync all of the tiddlers in the TiddlyWiki to a server, so it's to support ordinary client-server configurations, whereas here it looks like the approach would be to synchronize certain types of tiddlers to the tin can server. And if it was done correctly, one might be able to get quite useful bits of functionality, like being able to defer updates. So you can do a bunch of things offline, save the new tin can statements, which would just be tiddlers that haven't been synced to the tin can server yet. And then later, assuming you could then save changes, and then later when you reopened the wiki, you'd be able to sync those changes to the tin can API. So that's a pretty, so those are interesting generic use cases, quite apart from the fact that there's always been a lot of interest in TiddlyWiki itself for this type of, for any type of learning application. So it's pretty cool.
I also think, Ed, if you post your questions to the TiddlyWiki group and give a little, let's say, interesting description what can be achieved. Maybe someone which knows how to do this stuff is interested, and you can join forces. So I think if you make some promotion on the group, then it's always good.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, the group. I'm amazed at the quality of the community that I see within this group. I'm just blown away.
Well, that's very good to hear you say that. It's been particularly busy recently as well, actually, which is also really nice to see. Awesome. So let me go back to the Q&A app. So I now... Oh, well, your question's already fallen off the top, Ed, but hopefully we've covered what you were after. And now there's a handful of questions from Branimir. We'll kick off with this one. Can the search result be placed in a tab of its own or another dedicated area so that all the tabs below the search box remain visible and browsable during and after a search? That's a very good question. And I mean, I suspect the basic answer, the answer to, which is that absolutely that can be done. But at the moment, it would need to be done by overriding the entire sidebar tiddler. And that's problematical because that's the sort of system tiddler that is liable to be modified in later updates of TiddlyWiki. So in fact, for me, this question is much less about doing the specific customizations that you're talking about, and more about how we make it possible to do customizations without overriding shadow tiddlers. So overriding shadow tiddlers is a good general answer that lets you radically change the UI, but at this cost of impeding later upgrades. Does that fit with your understanding, Branimir?
I understand your short answer is no. At least not for 5.1 something.
Well, as usual, there's...
I do have an idea. So probably if it would be possible to have a button with one click save the search result into a tiddler, into a standard tiddler. So you get a new tiddler, which may be temporary or whatever.
Yes.
But you can see it with the recent in the recent tab, and you can reopen it. I think this would be helpful already.
Well,
So
I was going to
not
say
exactly the solution, but a workaround.
I think we might be able to do even better than that actually. So let me stop working with the encrypted version. That's a bit confusing.
From a user perspective, my problem is that I very often do searches, but at the same time I would like to go and be able to see the recent tabs and open tabs.
Yes, I completely agree. So look, what I think is feasible and would be worth doing is, where are we? Here we go, toolbars. So you know here, both in the tools menu and here in control panel, we've got places where you can switch off and on individual toolbar buttons. What I would like to be able to do is to also switch off and on individual sidebar tabs, and with exactly the same interface. So you'd click a checkbox and that tab would appear here. And so then what we could do is add a search tab, which would, I guess, be off by default in TiddlyWiki.com, that would have its own search box and show the search results within that tab. And then the second thing we'd need is an equivalent checkbox for hiding or showing the search box here. And so then people who wanted to could hide this search box, which would, I guess, also hide the advanced search button, and they could hide the text box. Guys, I'm really sorry, my doorbell's gone, and I don't think that there's anybody here to answer it besides me. So will you just excuse me a moment? I'll leave you with that.
Well, he's not here to hear me, but I don't know who would possibly want to skip or to hide the search area. I mean, for any kind of wiki, searching is the most important part.
You probably get a second search area. So it's just that you don't have two search areas. So because I also want to have a possibility to click a recent tab or something like this. So you have two independent search areas, and let's say the main search area can be hidden. And if you open the second one, you just go to search, and then you can save the results.
I mean, your idea of saving the search results is a useful one.
This is still possible. So if you have two search areas, then that's it. So at the moment we already have the advanced search. And then we have the standard search, which is on TiddlyWiki.com, and then we have probably a tab with stores its content, and still have the advanced search too. So who cares?
I think that for the moment, Branimir, what you absolutely can do. Oh, let me screen share again. Is two things. You can add a new search tab. Obviously, now that's just adding a new tiddler with the right tag. But then you could use CSS and a custom style sheet to hide this search area. So the entire search area is in a div with class TC search. So if and there's nothing defined for TC search at the moment, but if we set TC search display equals none, then that search area will disappear. Does that make sense, Branimir? So it's two steps, but I think that does entirely do what you want without overriding any shadow tiddlers.
Yeah, I think I'll try that.
Excellente. Thank you, Branimir. And next question also from Branimir. What is the suggested way to apply a new line in text without forcing a paragraph? And I'm not sure that I totally understood this one, actually. Branimir, let me show you what I was... the question was how to apply a new line in text without forcing a new paragraph. So we'll create a new tiddler, and put the preview on, and
yeah, I can explain that. It's because the latest changes about simple text is if I want a new line, then I have to create 2 new lines while writing my text. But if I do like this, what you're doing now, putting different lines but next to each other without an empty line, on the result text, it all sticks as one paragraph.
yes.
So I would like to be able to just create the thing that you have just selected, to be able to create this thing as seen, as rendered. I don't know how to explain it.
Yes, no, that makes sense. So the closest we've got at the moment is the triple double quotes. Apologies. So that's 3 double quote symbols, which flicks into a hard line break mode. So there isn't currently a way to do it across all tiddlers, but if you've got a passage where you want to have single line breaks, that's the way to go. And the formatting, sorry, formatting still works, apart from this different treatment of line breaks. So would that be sufficient in your case, Branimir?
Yes, I know about this solution, and the other one that I have seen is actually writing a BR
yes, I've seen that
element,
too.
but I just wanted to know, according to the architecture of this TiddlyWiki, what is the preferred way of doing it? What is the simpler or intended by design way?
It depends on the use case, of course. I mean, there are people who I think prefer the TiddlyWiki Classic way of handling line breaks, and there isn't really a good answer for them at the moment, apart from to continue using TiddlyWiki Classic. For the situations where there are isolated cases where one would like to be able to type a single line break and have that show as a hard line break, it is the triple double quotes that's recommended. But as I say, really, I think of that as being a feature to support poetry, and I'm not sure that that it covers all of the use cases, but yeah, hopefully it's sufficient for poetry, song lyrics, and that kind of thing.
I also think you shouldn't do a hard line breaks at all, because if you have different screen sizes, it always breaks layout. So you also have a problem with layout, with CSS layout. So if you assign a different theme, the BRs will break your layout.
I mean, I guess it's useful in the situations where you're working with source text, which has significant line breaks, structural line breaks, which again is back to poetry.
Sometimes you have to have a line break, so that's the BR for, I think, and then for poems or something like this, then it can be the triple double quotes. But I think there is no general rule.
No, I don't think. I'm not sure that. But well, as I say, I would really like to understand the use cases, but my rough feeling is that we're covering the important use cases at the moment.
What I'm using is just writing documentation for other people who I am sure they will only read on normal screens, so on their computers.
Go with paragraphs. If you in normal cases, if something, if a description has a context, then it belongs into one paragraph. If you need hard line breaks, then there is something wrong, probably with the description.
Maybe. I mean, well, Branimir, I mean, what's? Can you show us an example?
No, it's at work.
Okay. Well, so I'm very interested in understanding the use cases. So. Helping me to see, the shortcomings with how you're trying to do things at the moment is very useful.
I have been doing documentation for a very long time for training purposes, and yeah, we had a department which is called applications, and in the German language, like let's say for software engineers, it was very common to put something which is really important into single brackets. But for a description, this is simply wrong, because single brackets is just a side note. and not something important. So that's why when we had to use the text which was coming from developers, we just removed most of the outer content and just cleared the single brackets, and then we got the main topic which was really important to be covered. So yeah, for me, in my opinion, it's similar to hard line breaks. If you need a hard line break, then there's probably something wrong with the description. It's just my experience.
In my case, yeah, it's not that important now, as you said, your viewpoints. But in my case, I was just writing about where some files are located, and then on the next line, I was putting in backticks the actual path to the file that I was describing. So in my case, I had to do paragraphs, but this just separated with some white space, and the contents it was felt as different, not exactly what it was thought to look like.
I mean, it sounds like in that case, it possibly what you were writing is actually a list, of course, and should be displayed as a list.
Yeah, I actually found a way to do it, but I found myself struggling with keeping that just a new line or a new paragraph.
Well, I mean, one thought is that we, at the moment...
Sorry, is it possible maybe for definition lists or something like this? No? Just an idea?
Yes, I think, but I think you'd be no better off because you'd just be doing that. Sorry, and in fact it won't work when I'm in the middle of these guys. So what I was going to say was this, a list like this, and then what may be useful is if we were able to, if we didn't have to put a star at the beginning of each list item, if we could somehow do something like that. And that's not a serious suggestion, but if that syntax could be make each of the line break delimited items that follow be a separate list item, and then that would be a bit easier to type, and it would give you semantically perhaps the right thing of a list.
If you use the what is it, the definition list
yes.
that you first used, can you try it again?
Let me do it as a...
Instead of, yeah.
I will tell you one trick I found that works is just actually using a colon without putting a semicolon on top.
Yeah.
And this works very nice. The only problem is that it just indents a little bit, like with a tab or two.
Yeah.
And I'd like to avoid that, but it's still something. It looks very neat when you look at the Tiddler in edit mode. And
yes,
I want it to be like that because other people will be going there to edit the text, and I want them to actually understand, even without the preview, how it will be rendered.
Well, as I say, I think my main suggestion there would be that that very last one of a syntax for marking up an entire list without having to indicate on each list item that it's a list item. And I don't think that's a brilliant solution to what you're after, but that would seem to cover it.
Yeah. Also, if you could, I don't know, if you have only unordered lists and you don't need ordered lists, you could maybe change the CSS for the ordered lists and use ordered lists there. But I personally would prefer the column thing that Jeremy did. So yeah.
Well, when we enable multiple cursors in the code mirror, it will make some of that stuff much easier. I mean, something that I do all the time, I'm afraid, is copying tiddlers that I'm working on into my programming editor, which has multiple cursors, and then that allows me to easily put a star at the beginning of each line, for example, and then I copy back into TiddlyWiki. But as discussed in another thread, we need to pay attention to our code mirror plugin. So let me move to the next question, which was also from Branimir. How about being able to put the save or refresh icons on the tiddler level? So just to illustrate what Branimir's asking here, at the moment in TiddlyWiki we have two separate runs of icons. Each tiddler gets its own toolbar, and we can add items to that toolbar, and the page itself gets its own toolbar with different options available. And Branimir's question was, can we have some of these what are called page controls, can they instead be, or as well as, be repeated on the tiddler toolbar?
Yeah, I will tell you what my use case is, but I would really like to hear what you think about the idea.
Well, so my guess of your use case is that you'd like to be able to access them with the sidebar hidden.
Exactly, but
yes.
with the preview on, yeah.
Yeah, no. So I also wrestle with this a lot of the time when I do writing with TiddlyWiki. I like to have the preview on. The second you have the preview on, you really want to hide the sidebar.
Yes.
So in fact, there's the distinction between these two different types of toolbar buttons is very important. These are operations that are specific to a particular tiddler. These are operations that span the entire wiki. So,
yeah, that's why not all of them apply to this change.
Well, I think even things like save changes, you know, if there was a save changes button here, the semantics would appear to be that it should go red when there's a change pending. And yet having that happen on the tiddler hello there, which hasn't necessarily changed, feels a bit inconsistent.
So you're saying this might delude people that this red change means that only this current tiddler was changed, and they are saving only this current tiddler.
Yes, that's right. Because there's I mean, although we don't label it as such, the implication of these buttons being duplicated on each tiddler is that they are, and obviously the way they're laid out within the tiddler is supposed to imply that they're local to that tiddler. So, although I completely recognize the problem, as a solution, I think it's a bit problematical, because although most users wouldn't notice it, it does bring in an inconsistency, and that inconsistency, you know, I feel would slightly impede the learnability of TiddlyWiki. So I think the answer is fairly simple. It's that we need the ability to move or select some of the page controls and have them up here. So there should be a page toolbar at the top. And yes, I think if we had that on my personal TiddlyWikis, I'd probably hide the sidebar a lot of the time.
Wow, even the search would be there.
There would be also a possibility, yeah, probably, if you have a, let's say, a right sidebar, so that only the icons stay on the right side. So like in the Hangout, that we have the icons for the Q&A and the chat window, we have it on the left.
Here, where
probably we can have it on the right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a vertical menu.
So the chevron, I'm imagining two things. That if we made this top bar be programmable, one of the buttons that could be there is this chevron, the existing chevron, but there might also be a downward pointing chevron which just opens the sidebar as a pop-up, so overhanging the main tiddler, and then one could select which of those two ways of displaying the sidebar that one preferred, and one would be able to add any of these buttons up there to the top bar, as it is called. So I think that was something at one point it's an inconsistency that I wanted to fix before we came out of beta, but just didn't get a chance to. I mean, that chevron should also be available here, because it's the same kind of operation as these guys, and so yes, I hope to return to fix that.
Jeremy, one short question: Can you enter preview mode, please? Preview again. Edit and preview.
Yeah.
Would there be a simple way that to switch the sides? So I prefer to have the preview on the left and the edit area on the right.
Well, that's an interesting one.
I always have to switch it off because I can't stand it. So
I think that at the moment the order
CSS only.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, the preview at the moment is floated right, so I think if we float it left.
Okay, so I will check. Okay, I will check this. Okay.
Yeah,
I will check it. Okay.
Good, but I think it would. I'd certainly recognize the desire to switch them around. I'd never thought of that though. Interesting. Okay. So I should have pressed done on Branimir's question. So there are a couple of other questions that really topics that Armchair Designer, otherwise known as Yaka, raised with me before the Hangout started. Oh, hang on, So if I unscreen share, what I was going to do was paste these as questions so that they'll pop up.
Jeremy?
Hiya.
Just a real quick question. Have you read all those books that are behind you?
They represent my reading for many, many years. I mean, don't forget, when I was young, computers were a rare thing, and so I had to settle for books a lot of the time. So yes, I mean that's my sci-fi section there, which is maybe you can't see my mouse. Oh no, hang on, that's my sci-fi section, and I don't know. There's not that many books there, to be honest. To me, I see we've just been joined by Nathan. Hi, Nathan. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm well. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. Been missing the Hangouts, obviously, not having had one since our marathon Hangout on the 20th. But would you like to introduce yourself and in the normal way, Nathan?
I'm Nathan Kane. I'm a developer from the United States, and I've been working with TiddlyWiki for about a year, and very excited to finally have TiddlyWiki 5 out there in the world.
Indeed. Nathan shared with us on the anniversary Hangout the work that his girlfriend has done on using TiddlyWiki as a static site generator, which has really was a stunning thing. I'm still hoping that you're perhaps on the way to publishing some of that to make it easier for other people to follow in your footsteps.
Yes, I've actually had a couple of pull requests that I've been meaning to put together, and I also intend to put together an example of the IIS node configuration.
Great. Well, that'll be incredibly useful. So what we're doing is working through the questions in the Q&A panel. As ever, everybody feel free to add further questions. I've just poured in 3 questions in a row that came from Armchair Designer, otherwise known as Yaka, who's been on quite a few of the recent Hangouts. And so let me select the first of Yaka's questions. And it's a good one because it's not a lot of the time we talk about very specific things about what TiddlyWiki does at the moment and how we might change that. But this is a more far-reaching question or topic. So following and transclusions between standalone TiddlyWikis beyond TiddlySpace, pros and cons. So my interpretation of this question is that Yaka's aware that a long-term interest of mine has been how you can take TiddlyWiki, which for most people is largely an extension to their personal brain, how can we take it and turn it into a tool for people to use to collaborate, to share stuff between them. And my view is that there's a there's a dominant model for that, particularly in the field of wikis, which is to have a single wiki that is shared between a number of people, and anybody can come along and edit any page. And there are a number of successful wikis on the public internet, and a lot of wikis in the intranet behind the scenes that show that that's quite a successful approach. But it's not that attractive to me, because it's a centralized architecture that therefore requires moderation and requires quite a lot of agreement between the participants. And so one of the things that we did with TiddlySpace was try to surface a user interface that was imagined to be useful for sharing and working with other people's work. That's not very well expressed. And it was based on the idea of following other people so that you could see tiddlers that they wrote, and being able to flag what are called twin tiddlers. So basically, if I follow Eric and I write a tiddler called "What are we going to do about camel case?", then if Eric will see that because he follows me, he'll see it in a list of new tiddlers from people he follows, and then Eric can answer it by creating his own tiddler, also called "What are we going to do about camel case?" And then whenever I view my tiddler that's called "Whatever we're going to do about camel case," I'll see an indication that Eric's tiddler exists, and perhaps it'll be presented to me. Now, TiddlySpace did get that far. It does implement those features that I've just described. However, by the time we got there, the development on the client side of TiddlyWiki 5 was really running out of steam, running out of money, and we didn't really improve it to the extent that it was as useful as I had hoped. So that's one piece of work to one side. There's also, of course, Ward Cunningham's smallest federated wiki, which is an experimental wiki implementation that focuses primarily on this problem. So in Ward's case, there's basically the idea of a link to another wiki, and when you navigate that link, it pulls the content in from the target wiki so that you sort of see it in line. And that hence the federation. It means that I can create a constellation of content, that some of which is my own tiddlers, obviously using TiddlyWiki nomenclature, and some of which references tiddlers in other people's wikis. And I believe it also, Ward's work also makes use of the twin tiddler notion, but I think not in quite the same way as TiddlySpace.
And I think yeah, you need a server backend for this.
Well, the interesting thing that I learned only the other day is that Smallest Federated Wiki does support nodes that are static servers. So if you have a wiki at a URL, the requirement is that you can modify that URL to yield the URL of a JSON file that contains transcludable versions of the content in that wiki. So there's still the issue that the abstractions that Smallest Federated Wiki uses are not identical to TiddlyWiki's, but they're very, very similar. So in Smallest Federated Wiki, you have the idea of a page which is made up of paragraphs, and so in some senses a paragraph in Smallest Federated Wiki is like a tiddler, but in other senses it's of course a page that acts like a tiddler. It's a page that has a title and that you navigate to. So I mean, that's it really. I'm very I think I said before on the Hangouts, I watched the Smallest Federated Wiki work with some interest, and have long thought that a worthwhile goal would be for TiddlyWiki to implement the federation protocol that Smallest Federated Wiki has established, and sharing with Smallest Federated Wiki the desire that it be possible to have a node in the federation that is just a static server. So yes, it's an area, in fact, which it's very easy for anybody to experiment with. It's not something that's particularly tightly coupled with TiddlyWiki core code, and I'd certainly be thrilled to see more experimentation in that area. So of course Yaka's not here to respond, but hopefully he'll watch later. Any other thoughts on that? This idea of federation following and transclusions between standalone TiddlyWikis. Let me move to Yaka's next question, which is or topic. TiddlyWiki is a web app with mobile and Chrome/Firefox OS in mind. So what Yaka's getting at here is that a number of the kind of newer platforms out there, like Chrome, and Chrome OS and Firefox OS, they support downloadable applications that are written in JavaScript. Another example, I think, is Windows 8 or whatever they're on now, and Windows Phone, I think, have a very similar thing where you can wrap a JavaScript file up and it acts as a fully fledged application. So yes, I absolutely want to, I would like to see more of that, and would like TiddlyWiki to be easy for other people in particular to take and package as a web application for another platform. I say that because there's really a lot of these. I mean, smart TVs, I think some of them do something very similar where they have integrated apps that are actually HTML apps. And TiddlyWiki's standalone nature means that it should be quite easy for people to experiment with that stuff. My own needs at the moment are more than satisfied with TiddlyFox, but I completely recognize that Chrome OS support and Firefox OS support would be useful, and something I'd like to see. I mean, I guess I'm a bit influenced by not having a device. I use Chrome, obviously, but I don't have a device that I have iOS devices rather than Android devices, and I don't have a Firefox OS device. But maybe Mozilla will do some wonderful big tablet that I would really like, and then I'll start to get more involved in Firefox OS. Any other thoughts about that stuff?
No, I only think that the Firefox OS will have a memory problem. Because the devices have let's say quite low memory.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would need to be tested. So.
Yes. Well, maybe they're relying on the fact that soon smartphones will have, 4 gigabytes of RAM, etc. will be at the level that Firefox was.
Yeah, I think Firefox OS is targeted for cheaper phones.
Yes.
So yeah, if you say far below $100 without the contract. And yeah.
Well, let me go back to the Q&A. Excellent. So taking the last question from Yaka, topic, I should say, it says, Tiddly all the things, a collection of turnkey plugins for social media sharing, embeds, and subscriptions. So I take this to be about making it easier for people to integrate a TiddlyWiki with the rest of their social media life. So for sharing, that is that there are things that we could do that would mean that if you shared a link to an individual tiddler on, say, Twitter, that Twitter displayed the right thing, displayed that specific tiddler. The embed thing, again, making it easy to embed a single tiddler from tiddlywiki.com on a different site. And I think by subscriptions, probably one of the things Yaka is meaning is RSS, and we don't currently have support for RSS in TiddlyWiki 5, despite having had it in TiddlyWiki Classic. But yes, all of those things are goals. They're very related to the goals of the Indie WebCamp people. So we've talked about these people before, but they're a group that I would certainly hope to be able to benefit on the coattails of some of their work. So they're basically a group of hackers, developers who whose concern is wanting to be able to participate in the normal world of social media, but to be able to do so whilst keeping their content their own and being in control of the service, the server that they use. So that's caused them to do, I'm not sure that I understand their indexing system, but they've done a lot of work on things like pingbacks, so making it possible to signal from one blog to another that a comment on the that a post on the first blog has been answered by a comment on the second. So that's actually very close to the collaboration model that I was just discussing for a federated TiddlyWiki. And they've done a good deal of work on the integration stuff. So I think if I show you with known, so this is an open source social network application that, as far as I know, embodies an awful lot of the Indie Webcamp principles. So if you set up your identity on this platform, you get the chance to still connect with people who are on Twitter and Facebook and so on, whilst keeping your content on Known itself. So the reason why I was pointing, screen share off. I was pointing that out was to emphasize that this is an area in which there's a lot of prior art, and I would certainly like to bring some of that to bear upon TiddlyWiki. It's, again, as far as it goes for me personally, it's not a massive priority. I think probably getting embedding done right would be vaguely of interest to me, but it's not high on my personal list of itches to be scratched. Somebody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Jeremy. They have, let's say, Facebook and Twitter. They have some metadata that you can add to HTML files, and if you have the metadata right, then they, for example, Twitter can implement the pictures in a very, let's say, decent way, so that your feeds look good and the pictures look good. So I think if someone has let's say a template for a static web page, I think it would be relatively easy to create something that works for Twitter and Facebook. The problem is that they have their, let's say, the proprietary metadata, and they are not very compatible. So you have to include both of them, that it works well with Facebook and Twitter, and that's the
and I think that's the change that would benefit a lot of people. I think sharing links, and that's very much in the interests of people who are investing time and trouble in maintaining content on TiddlyWiki, because it enables them to advertise it to other people more effectively. So yeah, and you're right. A lot of it is a matter of updating the templates, and so that the single Tiddler static template, for instance, it'd be an interesting side job to update that with the required metadata. Okay, so that's all the questions that are in the Q&A slot. Does anybody here have any other topics or questions they're burning to ask? Otherwise, there was a couple of things I was going to suggest for quickly running through. Mario, I know there's the technical issue we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, I think we should keep it until the end, or close to the end.
I was going to say.
So what I would be interesting is what are you going to implement next? So probably what's your plans, and maybe what's your next bug fixes that you think should be fixed.
Well, this is something actually that I was prepared for discussing at the anniversary hangout. So let me just bring up the notes I wrote then. So in general, my priority at the moment is cleaning up. So what that means is not trying to avoid adding big new things to TiddlyWiki before we've cleaned up some of the loose ends that are already there. And I'll show you in a minute some of the things in 5.13 that really epitomize that idea of needing to do cleaning up. Then the second topic, and so it somewhat conflicts with the first, but is trying to assimilate the useful plugins and additions that are out there. So in the right now, there's things like Stefan's new Tiddler plugin, which is ubiquitously used, and we really need to have an official answer to that. There's also the TW5 Scholars, which really cries out to be adopted as a conventional TiddlyWiki edition, so that it's distributed from tiddlywiki.com. And there may well be others that I've not mentioned that I've seen that that are also, I think, good candidates. So where I want to get to with that is to have a Scholars edition, a to-do edition that's a really basic to-do list edition, and of course there's the Tiddly briefcase work recently, and I'm not sure whether that'll be whether that's where the author wants to take it, but one possibility is to install that on tiddlywiki.com. And then the third topic for me is trying to pay attention to other bits of the ecosystem that I've largely ignored in the last very few weeks. So I want to get us make Germaline.com be a static blog fed by TiddlyWiki, and part of the reason for that is to provide a good example of doing it. I think it's obviously related to the work of Nathan and his girlfriend that we were just talking about, but I think the particular case of a blog is, well, it's a much more off-the-shelf thing, if you see what I mean. So we'd hopefully create a standard blog theme that had some tweaks that people could apply to it, so that not all TiddlyWiki blogs end up looking exactly the same. So that's one thing, and then Tiddly Desktop and Tiddly Fox are both desperately in need of updates, particularly, as it says there, backups. So from a distance, when I don't have a red light in front of me flashing to say do something else more important, those are the sort of priorities, the goals for the next few months, and that is chosen quite deliberately, but I mean probably obviously, because one of the things that's been really clear during the last few weeks of the beta was that too much change in the core does have the impact of holding back the community around TiddlyWiki. So, you know, when there was a stage when we made the brutal changes to various symbol names, changing all the TW dash stuff, that I think was quite a discouragement for people who were running to keep their plugins or adaptations up to date with the TiddlyWiki core.
I think it was one of the last chances to actually do it. So.
Oh yeah, it wasn't the wrong thing to do. It's just that now we need to shift a bit of attention from that to trying to make sure the conditions are as good as we can make them for would-be contributors.
So if I could have a wish, so I would like to have TiddlyFox backup utility, because there is the one big red line in TiddlyWiki, keep making backups, and it should be a side note. So just that it says, okay, it's good if you have a backup, but TiddlyFox does it for you.
Yeah. I was away last week, which caused a backlog that I've only just caught up with, and one of the next things for me to look at is this pull request from Buggy Jeff, which is updates to TiddlyFox to enable it to handle backups for TiddlyWiki 5. And of course, Buggy J is the author of TiddlyClip, so he's been doing quite a lot of work in Firefox extension land. So I have to say I haven't had a chance to look at this or test it out, but hopefully that will work out, and I'll be able to release an enhanced TiddlyFox fairly soon.
Jeremy, I do have a question though. With TiddlyFox, it remembers the TiddlyWikis that you have enabled to be saved. Where is this stuff stored? I don't know how to reset it.
It's stored in the preferences, which is an API that's available to extensions. And yes,
yeah, but on the file system level.
I don't know that. I don't know what the answer to that is. I imagine it's probably in a SQL-like database or something. So what TiddlyFox needs to do is to present a user interface showing that list and allowing entries to be removed. And the challenge there is that for a long time I avoided have avoided adding any user interface features whatsoever to TiddlyFox because working in Firefox extensions is still such an alien environment for me. I feel slightly more encouraged now that Buggy J is working in the same area, so at least it means that we have access to some expertise. But yes, that's really been the hold-up.
I was hoping it somewhere is a text file where you can delete different entries.
Yes, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, or if it is I don't know, about config or something like this, but I couldn't find anything.
Well, that's interesting. It's entirely, if we look at the code.
I have looked at the code, so I know how you write it, and yeah, it's.
I mean, that prefs API. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an option for the preferences to appear in about config. It would be one of the sort of useful things that would normally motivate one to provide a prefs API like that.
It's a none of the about something. So.
No, I can, and maybe there's some setting we need to set to make that happen if it is indeed a feature, as I'm hoping. Okay, great. There's a new question in the Q&A from Armchair Designer, who says he can't come on live because he's cooking, so that's an excellent reason not to be here. Has anyone found a fix for timeline macro yet? And I'm not sure what's broken about it. Oh, well, I do know some things that are broken about it, but I'm not sure what fix you're referring to there, Jaka. Would you like to post a follow-up question just to clarify what that might be? Whilst Jaka's doing that, I would just like to show you very quickly a couple of recent changes. So well, actually, let's look at the revision history first. The changes in 5.13 are non-trivial, so this is the first release for a while that's had substantial improvements beyond documentation improvements, which we have obviously had a large number of. So one terrific thing is that we have a new translation, and it's a Russian translation, so that makes me particularly happy because I really like translations that have a different script, because they make my modest work look so much more sophisticated and attractive when I see them in a script that I don't understand, and therefore, you know, just see it as I'm afraid to say as funky typography. So obviously the same goes for the Japanese and Chinese, and I've seen in the past many translations of TiddlyWiki Classic, which always delights me to see. I don't know, Thai was one of those ones where I'm not really familiar with the script, and seeing something so familiar as TiddlyWiki rendered in that script was always quite fun. So switching back to English, I've finally addressed a couple of security issues that had been bothering people for a long time, one of whom was Mario. So now when I set a password, I need to provide the same password twice. And if I don't, and you can see those aren't the same, then it says the passwords do not match. And if I set the password now to clear it, I'm also asked for confirmation. Do you wish to clear the password? This will remove the encryption applied when saving this wiki. So hopefully that's what you were expecting, Mario, is it?
Yeah, and I think there was a discussion with someone at GitHub issues. He raised the I don't know, the question about the security, and I like these fixes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there remains an issue there that using TiddlyWiki securely and safely, I think, requires following lots of good practice, and that's not really well recorded at the moment. And Mario has several times expressed a concern that by presenting a nice, easy user interface for encryption, that could present a problem if TiddlyWiki makes it too easy to use encryption with behaviors that are not secure. So at its simplest, if I navigate to the encrypted version, as soon as I decrypt it, then anybody coming along and using the JavaScript console can obviously access all content. Even if I go to another site, then I think if I go back, I need to re-decrypt. But we're very much, one of the problems is that this kind of behavior is very much the domain of browsers. It's not always predictable for us how a browser is going to behave.
Yeah, I always think that if you, as long as you keep all the stuff as a file TiddlyWiki, it's okay, because there you could encrypt your hard disk and then it would be okay too. So you could work with a plain text version without any problems. But if it looks if it looks secure and people put it into the web or into the cloud, then everything is in danger.
Absolutely.
And if something is plain text, then it's plain text. And now if you if I don't know, a virus or something like this corrupts your memory and you have a memory dump, all this stuff, the whole operating system is in the memory dump. So you can read this stuff. So if there is really information that is valuable, it should be kept in a HTML file. But if it's just for keeping your mother away, it's fine.
Yeah, and I think it can play a useful role as part of with a range of measures in place. And as you mentioned, whole disk encryption, I think, is still probably the best advice for most people. I
think in the GitHub issue there was also a discussion about implementing the single tiddler encryption from I think it's Danielo, right?
Yes.
And there was a discussion. Okay, should it be still a plugin or should it be part of the core? And I think we didn't find a solution for this. So, what's your opinion about having a single tiddler encryption?
I think it's very useful, and I can imagine a number of different configurations that could be useful. It's the user interface is pretty problematic. Getting a decent user interface, but it does allow for some really obvious use cases. You know, in an education environment, for instance, being able to password protect the answers and giving the students the password at the right time to decrypt them, all kinds of things. Still having concerns about using it for stuff that really needs to be private from everybody, but it certainly provides a lot of interesting options. The mechanism at the moment, of course, the decryption mechanism works during the boot up process. And one of the implications of the requirements for the way that Daniela is doing it is the need to be able to do it interactively. So after you've opened the TiddlyWiki, being able to provide a password to unlock a particular tiddler.
Yeah, I also think that the user interface is one really big issue with this. Yeah, I do have let's say an extra program that manages my passwords, and I really take care about the file, because if I lose this stuff or if I forget the password, which I don't, then I have no access to the internet anymore.
Yes, the consequences.
So there you really have to have choices so that you can't destroy your content, because with the TiddlyWiki Classic there have been some plugins also with single tiddler encryption, and I managed to let's say to destroy the TiddlyWiki. So partly because forgetting different passwords. So if you have a different password for every tiddler, then it's very, very common that you forget some.
Yes.
So this has to be managed in a really sensible way. So because otherwise we will have requests. Okay, how can we decrypt the stuff, or where's the backdoor? And because there is none, so the data is lost.
Yes, indeed. And I think for the moment, it's partly because of those later issues that we were discussing that I'm not that keen on making the encryption features of TiddlyWiki 5 more prominent at the moment, because it's I think we could do with more experience about what we have got in terms of the full wiki encryption.
Okay.
So the second thing I was really thrilled about was the KTeX plugin. So it used to be that the KTeX plugin didn't work when you ran it on the server, so therefore you couldn't create static renderings, and that is now fixed. So this is a copy of the KTeX edition that's been rendered statically. So there's no JavaScript. I can't change tabs and so on. It's and yet you can see that the equations have rendered normally. So that's awesome. That means, for instance, that we can create EPUBs that incorporate KTeX formulae. And it's one of the ability to work both on the client and the server was one of the things that made KTeX so attractive for me over and above MathJax. And I understand that, I mean, a lot of the feedback we've had recently about KTeX has actually been that it doesn't support enough of LaTeX. So there's apparently a lot of common LaTeX idioms that are not supported by KTeX. But when you look on the issues list of KTeX, you can also see there's a fair number of people asking for specific features, and the guys appear to be responsive to those requests. So hopefully the KTeX team will be pleased that TiddlyWiki users are so enthusiastic about KTeX and will welcome the feedback and be able to respond to it. So yes, in fact, looking back, the vast majority of tickets are for adding features that aren't currently implemented in KTeX. Then there's a couple of new operators that have been added by the Divo. A few minor tweaks, like the extending the list macro to use the caption field. Sorry.
Jeremy, there's an issue about this caption field. Have you seen this already?
I was going to mention that. Yes. So you can see it in the community tiddler, where we've now got this ridiculously long tab title. So yes, I will respond to Evelina's comment on the ticket, and we'll deal with that.
Okay.
I was just going to draw your attention to the zoom in problem. So the zoom in problem on TiddlyWiki.com, if I switch to zoom in mode, the zoom in story view, and then I hide the sidebar, you get this maddening thing where the tiddler is slightly too wide. It doesn't account for the margin on the left, and so you get horizontal scroll bars, and it's a great mess. That's now fixed, so you get the tiddler width that you would expect, and yeah, it just works. But doing that was a required fair bit of modification to refactor the zoom in story view to make it a little bit friendlier. Then yes, well, the one that a problem that's been around for a really long time, and it's one of Mario's favorites because
the jumping toolbar.
Yeah, so just to show, I've slowed down animations, and if I close a tiddler as the other tiddler comes in, do you see that little jump that you get? And I guess Mario presumably isn't running animations that slowly, but even at the normal speed, it's quite noticeable and
it's not only with closing, but also with opening, and sometimes if you have a 400 milliseconds, and it stays like this, and if you have a long title, then you can't access the icons anymore. So
okay.
So there is some real issue, but now finally we got it, and I'm really happy about this.
Yes, well, it was entirely it was you and Andre between you, I guess. Yeah. Andre, who's the guy who did the
test case.
Russian translation, and he produced an amazingly detailed test case for this that meant that the eventual fix was adding 2 overflow none CSS rules, which is just marvelous. It's the kind of thing that makes people go insane who work with
I wouldn't have found the solution. So with the test case that was provided, I actually was able to raise a issue at Mozilla, at Bugzilla, because at the very beginning I couldn't raise a ticket there because let's say if I show them TiddlyWiki, then they say okay.
Yes.
We need a simple test case and not that. Difficult, and with the, let's say, simple test case, it was possible, and I did raise a ticket there, and we get the answer. I don't know, 5 hours or something like that. So I'm really happy about the open source community. It's really great fun.
Yes, indeed, and in the same vein here, you can see that there's been 2 new contributors to this release. Andre, who's done the Russian translation. FGHHFG, and that I think is not their real name, who has contributed an amazing array along with uCali of documentation improvements. So I'm really pleased with that, and I'm also pleased that, given what I was saying earlier about cleaning up, here we've hit some long-standing tickets, fixed some, a bunch of minor issues that were, in many cases, quite irritating. So hopefully there will be a bit more of this. I think the last release, 5.12, was, I don't know why I'm going here to look, but it was the 27th. So we're a little bit overdue. I was aiming to be doing releases about every week at the moment, and I'd certainly hope to release 5.13 in the next day or 2, and one of the things that, yes, we will fix is, oops, sorry, I've done it wrong, is these crazy tabs here. Excellent. So that was just a quick run through of the of changes coming in 5.13. Now, returning to the Q&A, Yak has kindly jogged my memory of the timeline issue that he was raising. Um, okay, so this looks like a significant problem with the timeline macro, and I'm judging by this, it looks as though Yak is saying that there's, so you can see that this is, given that timeline macro, Yak is saying that he would expect it to yield this, and I guess that was done at a particular time when that reflected what the recent changes had been, and in fact he's getting something else, but the trouble is, I think that we're yes, that second one is a live example, so that means that the example has slightly fallen out of synchronization with what's been given here. So I believe one of the issues might be that the way that this limit works. Let's just have a quick look at the timeline macro source. Right. So the way the limit works is counterintuitive, therefore it's probably wrong, but it's not that easy to change. Decoding this is quite difficult. This is a fairly complex filter expression, but what we're doing here is we're saying non-system tiddlers, then there's the ability for people to plug in another filter, and in the case that Yakka's mentioning, that other filter is tag logbook, so he's just getting those tiddlers that carry that tag. Then we're filtering for the modified field, so we ignore tiddlers that don't have a modified field, reverse sort by modified. Then we apply the limit. So at that point, it's then going to take the top 100 tiddlers or whatever the limit specifies, and then we apply the each day filter. So it's at the point that that means that the number of days that is shown by the timeline will be the number of days spanned by the top 100 or whatever the limit is, number of tiddlers. So if you've modified 100 tiddlers that day, then there will just be, you'll just get 1 day shown. And I think what's counterintuitive about that is that then we, the sub-entries, so the entries that are shown for each day, aren't subject to the same limit. So if you've got a case like this, September the 21st having a large number of tiddlers, even if September the 25th had 99 tiddlers in it, then September the 21st would scrape through as being one of the days that was going to be displayed, but then all of the tiddlers on that day would be displayed rather than a partial list of just the top one. So overall, what that means is that the list limit is not being observed in the expected way. Looking at it here, we've got.
But I think this behavior was the same in TiddlyWiki Classic, and it caused the same problems there. It's just a matter of documentation. Yeah, I think so.
But I think there's something quite weird going on here now I come to look, because he's got limit 10. So what that means is the expectation is September the 10th, 21st, and 25th are the dates that are covered by the top 10 most recently modified tiddlers. And yet, as we can see, the September the 10th one there's way more than 10 tiddlers before that. So I think it is an issue that I need to investigate further. But to answer Yakka's question, I haven't looked at it recently.
Yeah, but I think what the timeline wants is that you say, okay, give me the tiddlers back 3 days, and then you want to have all the tiddlers within the 3 days. If you have a limit, let's say three tiddlers for every day, you get a list that actually is worth nothing. So, if, for example, you have 3 days, and so the September 21st now is cutted with three.
Right. That's so I agree.
That's simply wrong.
The fact, I think it's desirable that any day that is shown in the timeline, we should show the entirety of those tiddlers.
Yes.
But the issue here, you can tell, is something else, which is that we are showing that we should only be showing the days that are covered by the most recently 10 modified tiddlers. We're actually showing one extra day. Despite the fact that the tiddlers there are further down the list than the limit. The limit would mean that it should, what I would have expected is for it to have stopped there. So there would have been 2 tiddlers on September the 25th, 8 tiddlers on September the 21st, but as discussed, the inner loop of the timeline timeline macro would still display all of the tiddlers on September the 21st. So I don't really understand why it's worse than that.
I think I did some debugging and I did understand it, but I can't.
I
just said, okay, let's stop to use the limit. It's just not what I expect.
know that feeling. But yes, I mean to acknowledge Jaka, this is definitely an issue I would like to. The 2 issues I'd like to resolve. The first, that appears to be a bug here, and the second is whether the way that we implement limiting is the right way to do it. Okay, so thank you, Jaka, for those questions. And I'm just going to look over there's a couple of points here from Nathan in the chat window. RSS over WebRTC channels would be a fun solution to those questions. Real-time social without a social network behind it. In addition to... Oh, okay, and I think that's the second topic. In addition to a backup trigger in TiddlyFox, a run git and add commit trigger would be very handy. So this is essentially ways of making Git be the back end of TiddlyWiki, which is certainly also very useful. And Nathan's also saying that we should enforce that users are using the right versions of Node. That sounds like something that would be worth ticketing and pull requesting if you can. At the moment, TiddlyWiki 5 does have code to check the version of Node, but it's currently written, it'll only check for one version number. And I take your point about us needing to support both the 0.8 branch and the 0.10 branch. But let's go back to the first thing that Nathan mentioned, which was RSS over WebRTC channels. And just to explain for those who may not have come across WebRTC, it's incredibly cool. So it's a real-time communications protocol that you can use from the browser. So these guys is the kind of I'm not sure what the word is, the organization that is promoting WebRTC. The primary use case, I think, has been to try and do things like Skype or indeed Google Hangouts. I think what we all see to be interesting, though, is that underneath that, there's a more fundamental capability to deliver JSON or other types of messages in real time to multiple nodes. So I'm certainly fascinated by that. There's things like being able to do synchronized slideshows that I think would be jolly useful. And the chat within the context of a TiddlyWiki. So there's been a lot of attention for something called Slack. I think it might be Slack HQ. Slack is a is a kind of IRC-like tool on the web for Teams. Quite nicely done, nice integration. It's of course not massively customizable. It's a product that you use out of the box. But I do think there are some of these applications that TiddlyWiki could be quite useful for. For instance, one could imagine a chat feature that was basically based on TiddlyWiki filters, just saying, show me all the tiddlers that are tagged with the ID of this conversation, and to have those being automatically updated via WebRTC. So going back to Ed's questions at the beginning about integrating JavaScript libraries, there's no shortage of JavaScript libraries that would be very interesting to integrate into TiddlyWiki. Far too much to do.
I also think there is a Mozilla project which has the ability that you all just have to add to your site, and then you have WebRTC. I think they called it Tank sometime, but I don't know that they changed the name.
Right.
So I can't remember it anymore. But it was also that they hijacked a common input box, and then you could have two cursors. With one standard browser input box.
Well, let's hope CodeMirror doesn't integrate it, because then that'll make integrating with CodeMirror more complicated.
Yeah.
The only thing it's not sad about WebRTC. It does need a server. There has to be a server that intermediates.
For establishing the communication.
Yeah, exactly. But it's only a kind of, I was going to say an exchange server, but that makes it sound like an email server. But an exchange, like a telephone exchange, exactly as you say, it just switches the parties together, and then they communicate directly. And that's pretty interesting, I think.
I think they had to make this stuff so that you can go beyond firewalls. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. But it's the sort of thing that TiddlyWiki, I don't think running one of those servers is immensely expensive, and it's possible that TiddlyWiki may be able to run one for its own stuff.
Branimi has raised the question. Branimi, I have a working prototype for this, but I didn't publish it yet. So
Branimi's question is using a dedicated field TOC parent for table of contents instead of tags. And that's an interesting one. I mean, I guess the concern that might be being answered that I've seen people discuss a bit is that using the tag-based table of contents does pollute your tags. Of contents, and using fields instead seems like a useful way to avoid that.
Yeah. What I did is a combination of a parent field and tags, but the possibilities are really interesting, and it's really fun to play with.
Would you like to show us?
I don't know. I can send it to the group, I think, but okay. I don't know. I have the code. But there is some let's say 2 questions. I don't know. How long do you have time today?
I've got another 5 minutes or so.
Okay, so I will be fast. There is a technical question which I raised in the. So I have to share first. I'll share my screen. So can you see it?
Yeah, briefly.
Okay.
Let me click on it.
There was a question on the Google group, which is the Tiddler toolbar, and I did post the code, and I already included it here into this Tiddler, so that you actually can see it. I have to switch theme again. So the problem that actually raised the ticket is if you have the read-only theme.
Yeah.
If I switch to the read-only theme, you hide the SVG, and if I click to view the stuff, then you see that the span, which is called, which is created by the reveal, is still there. The problem with one icon is not that big, so it's just a little bit space. But if you have several items, then the space gets bigger, so it's just annoying.
So can you show me though, is the space that span is consuming, what's that coming from?
It's from the reveal widget, because the theme of the read-only theme just removes the SVG. So you
Right,
apply
okay, but is the
SVG.
padding on the span, or is the white space inside it, or perhaps?
I think it's a margin padding or whatever.
Okay, I think because I think that's really the issue, is that I think the current layout may well be relying on a white space character in between the toolbars to provide some of the spacing. And if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have that space for the hidden button.
It's still not really the solution, because what you really want is something like this, that I have a top element that is part of the let's say a span, so this is the same
Right,
level.
but this is quite critical, because what I recommended in the group was that the class you got there, tc-toolbar-edit, instead of being applied to the same span as the TC reveal class, should be applied to an inner span inside it. So that the only problem with that would be if the white space, it really is coming from the TC reveal span, and if it is, whether we can change it.
Yeah, but if you have a look at the DOM structure, it's already and just adding a lot of spans and divs and all this stuff.
Well, but the trouble is, though, that spans and divs are supposed to be semantically invisible, so they absolutely are the solution to this problem. I agree that when you're navigating the DOM by hand, having lots of nested spans and divs can be inconvenient. But the trouble is that what you're suggesting here is a bit of an overload to the reveal widget. I would prefer that the reveal widget was just concerned with hiding and showing its content, and that it didn't have to take on this additional concern of allowing customized.
No, it's not the reveal widget which has to do something. It's just how to create the span, because the code already does create a span. So the reveal widget has an option, has an attribute which is class.
Mm-hmm.
And if I provide this attribute, it's just there. So the reveal widget does not need to be changed. It's just the way that all the stuff. So this is
okay. I hadn't understood that was what you meant.
But the problem is that I did remove with the filter widget. I did a remove prefix.
Why do you want to do that?
Yeah, because I need the edit. I only need the edit and not the long element.
But why do you not? But what's wrong with having the long title? I mean, the long title is still unique.
But if I need to add a class which, let's say, let's see it. So that would be a TC. No, it's not TC button. It's here. It's TC toolbar minus dollar blah blah blah, and I don't know. You get a class that nobody can handle. Yeah, nobody can handle this.
Handle that? Why not? I don't know. Because we want the class to reflect the name of the toolbar button. The name of the toolbar button is its title. I mean, yes, they're long, but we do that because toolbar buttons live in the same namespace as everything else.
I don't know. I don't know. Are there any characters that can't be used for classes?
No, just spaces is the only problem.
I don't know if there are spaces. I just wanted to have a
so no, I mean, at the moment there are no spaces in a toolbar title's name, but we could add URL encoding, I suppose, if we thought that there were toolbar buttons with spaces in the name. But I mean, I think the weakness of this approach is that it makes, well, I mean, you said it yourself, is the way that it embeds the core UI / buttons prefix, and clearly we want people to be able to add. If people add a button and it's not part of the core, then that button should not be called $:/core blah blah blah. It should be called $:plugins blah blah blah.
Yeah, I was searching for a simpler way. So the solution here, it works, and if I have a custom toolbar, I just use it, and that's it. And I just wanted to have let's say a simpler solution, which is
well, I understand where you're coming from, wanting the simpler classes, but I think the only way that we can do that reduces the flexibility of the toolbar mechanism, because it requires us to introduce a convention that we don't have at the moment.
No, I just wanted to have a possibility, probably, I don't know, to apply a filter like this, remove prefix or something like this to the transclude widget or somewhere else, because the only widget that at the moment can remove and add prefixes is the list filter, or is list.
Right, but I mean, you only need to do that remove prefixing in order to try and get a pretty a class name out of it, and I just don't see that the pretty class name is worth it.
Yeah, okay, there's a different view in this. Yeah, so we agree to disagree.
Yes, well, I mean, as I say, it's weighing the two things up. So certainly not diminishing the value of having comprehensible class names, but if the cost is reducing the flexibility of how we handle toolbar buttons, that's what seems problematical.
Yeah, I don't think that it's removing flexibility. Okay, so this is the first thing, and the second one was the pull request.
Yeah.
So I did upload it to this. 1 moment. So it's live there at the moment, and it creates a plugin which gives some information about the TiddlyWiki, TiddlyWiki information about file name and host name and all this information. So you get the document host, you get document host name, and all this stuff. And I was creating several tiddlers similar to the browser sniffing mechanism. So, for example, the info doc location host contains the host name. In this case, it's TiddlyWiki 5. And with this information, someone or the reveal widget can take this information and can show different information depending on the host, or probably you can create custom toolbars. Yeah, so that's I just want to show it, and it has some, let's say, additional elements. Where do I have them? That's the document path. Oh, I have to go to search. Info doc. So it's file domain file. So this is most of the time only used for file TiddlyWiki. So it's, in this case, it's empty. So I have to open index. Plugins. So you get the file path, and the file path information creates several tiddlers info, so that you can see here. So the file path itself is tagged with the elements of the path, and then I created a single tiddler which just contains the information yes, which can be used if the path, the TiddlyWiki, or one element of the TiddlyWiki path is git, then it says yes, and the reveal widget or the list widget can display content or remove elements from the UI. So this was the TiddlyWiki, and then we had some discussion about should it be part of the core or not.
Yeah, and I think the use case that you had, which was driving, putting it in the core, was around the production of the 3 German editions. My question was, and so your proposed solution was to create a single HTML file that, when viewed in different locations and therefore with different components in its path, that it would display different content.
Yeah.
And I was saying that I was concerned about that because it means that people would see one of those TiddlyWiki editions on the web, and then if they downloaded it, it would behave differently in a way that might be hard for them to anticipate or explain. And your response to that was about the ease of modification of the 3 German language wikis. Where I am is just wondering why we can't use include wikis to share content between the wikis, in so that each of the 3 has their own bits of custom content.
Yeah, I have found a solution for one element already. So this is the links. I can create language specific tiddlers for the links, and then if you switch the language, then you can change the links. So this is standard behavior of TiddlyWiki, but still there is the problem with creating the elements.
Well, no, but what I don't understand is why you can't create a separate create each edition as a separate wiki.
I do already create each edition as a separate wiki because we have to. But the goal would be, I know several let's say structures in a company where you have a directory structure with very well defined names, and I thought it would be interesting to have the possibility to give the user, because for a plugin author it's no problem because you have to you have access to the document location variable, but the user has no easy way to modify.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I don't have a problem with that as a plugin for people to experiment with, and yeah, let's learn what people can do with it. The particular sticking point here is whether it needs to be added to the core distribution to enable the German language editions to be produced.
No, it just was a question. So it just was a question. Okay, if it's part, or if it should be part of the core, then the next question is, okay, can I implement, let's say, user-specific plugins into the German language edition?
But why would you want it in the German language edition?
At the moment, when I create or when I develop the German language, so I start the server, so I serve the stuff, and I go to edition. It's a server edition, and the server edition says include the DAT, because when I create new tiddlers, it's part of the AT edition. So now the server runs, and if I open it, localhost, so I can produce new elements. And then if I test something, I sometimes switch to German language. And the problem now is that this tiddler, because it is a tiddler, is saved back to the AT path. And now if I forget to switch it back at the end, and now then I create the pull request, and you pull it and you create it, then you create 2 times the German version. So it's just the way how the stuff works, because at the moment it has to be a tiddler.
Okay, so I think there is a useful feature here, and that's a wiki folder, the TiddlyWiki info file can have a do not save section, which specifies particular tiddlers that shouldn't be saved back to the file system. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So I think it does. Resolve.
Is it underline do not save or something like this?
I'm trying to remember. maybe it's. Let me try and remember what I was using it for.
Mhm. Okay, now this would be a solution because that's the problem at the moment because since this is a tiddler and if I forget to switch it back, then it's saved and then you create a edition with the wrong setting. My mouse is broken.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I will search about it.
So I have a feeling. I'm so sorry, Mario, that it was a feature that we had. I think when I'm trying to remember, very similar situation. So it was some problem that I was trying to solve in my use of TiddlyWiki, preparing TiddlyWiki.com, and the solution was to add in TiddlyWiki.info a list of tiddlers that wouldn't get saved. So I think at the time it was the way that we stopped the history list and the story list being saved. And that was, again, I think it was back when saving them would typically not be what you wanted because it meant when you reopened you'd get the same values again. So it may be that I removed that feature because it wasn't being used, but it would be worth doing that little bit of investigation because it does certainly sound as though that would be the place to put it.
Yeah, but do not save is probably not the right solution because this only works with the server version. I would prefer a command line, or let's say a new command that is able to create a tiddler or to overwrite the tiddler at
hang
build
on.
time.
Why would you need to be able to do this in the browser? I mean, in the browser, you're not going to say. I mean, what problem are you solving in the browser? What you showed me was when you're editing content using the server edition.
Yeah, that's right. But I still would prefer the command line, which is able to create new tiddler content.
But we can do that with set field, can't we?
No, because set field can't handle raw text at the moment. It's just that you have to have the template.
Right. Yes. Of course, I remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So perhaps we didn't complete that set field discussion. I think it would be useful for set field to be able to set raw text too, but I couldn't see an easy way to do it whilst retaining compatibility.
I think my pull request. No, the pull request was compatible, but it added a new element.
Yes, we should probably return to the discussion on the pull request actually, because I must definitely close tonight's session actually.
Yeah, no problem.
But guys, so as I always say, but mean really sincerely, thank you very much for spending your time with me this afternoon. Very useful as usual. Really appreciate the feedback, and of course, in many cases, thank you also for the contributions that we have been discussing. And I'll look forward to seeing everybody next week. I think for the moment we'll absolutely, whether we start doing weekend hangouts as well, I will continue doing the Tuesday hangouts just so that that habit stays ingrained. Yes, look forward to seeing you next week. So we'll wave goodbye and press the, and I'll stop the broadcast now. Cheers, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.